On the 20th of October 2011, the Libyan dictator who had ruled and been in power since 1969 was subjected to a ruthless and brutal execution and death at the hands of his rebel enemies. The Libyan civil war had broken out to overthrow and depose Colonel Gaddafi, and many across the nation had been fed up with the oppressive regime they had lived under for many years. Colonel Gaddafi is considered one of the strangest and most bizarre dictators to have ever seized control of a country, and he was involved in funding international terrorism and rebel groups, and his government even later accepted responsibility for the Lockerbie bombing. But Gaddafi's death was rather horrific, and it was captured on many people's smartphones and devices, as the struggling dictator was found inside of a large drain pipe, his convoy having been hit by a NATO airstrike. Following his death, the rebels, in medieval fashion, paraded Gaddafi's body and corpse and left it on display for some time, practically inside of a freezer that did not work, and thousands flocked to witness the body of the man who had ruled over them. Today we look at the display of Gaddafi's corpse. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Gaddafi's rule and regime inside of Libya was erratic and unpredictable, and his government were involved in financing huge amounts of revolutionary groups, from the Black Panthers to the Irish Republican Army, the IRA. His agents would assassinate enemies of Libya abroad, and they were also involved in different conflicts with nations that bordered Libya. Gaddafi had almost faced death decades before, in 1986, as a fleet of US warplanes bombed different Libyan targets, and they killed and wounded some of his children, but narrowly missed the dictator. The Libyan involvement in the Lockerbie civilian aircraft bombing in 1988 led to the nation to have strict sanctions applied to it, and Gaddafi was isolated as a world leader. Nobody wanted anything to do with him. But when sanctions were later dropped, he rose to the forefront of African politics again, and was even elected the chairman of the African Union in 2009, and was even invited to speak in front of the UN General Assembly. However, in February 2011, anti-government demonstrations forced the presidents out of their seats of power in Tunisia and Egypt, and people in Libya saw what was happening in neighbouring countries, and they protested against Gaddafi and his regime. Protests quickly spread across the nation, and the Gaddafi regime violently tried to suppress them, and the dictator ordered the police and mercenaries to fire live ammunition into protesters, and he ordered strikes by artillery and fighter jets against his own people who were demonstrating. Gaddafi's violent tactics caught the attention of the UN and NATO, and he remained defiant in a speech which was televised, and he refused to step down and give in. He even accused the rebels of being off their heads, but he struggled to hold on to power. Rebel forces had taken large amounts of Libya and had encircled Tripoli, where Gaddafi remained in control of. He claimed he was still loved by the Libyan people, but the UN Security Council then approved sanctions against him, such as the freezing of his assets and a travel ban. But NATO then decided to conduct an air campaign against pro-Gaddafi forces, claiming it was necessary to protect the lives of innocent civilians, and different nations utilised their aircraft to strike Gaddafi's men. Some of Gaddafi's closest allies even began to defect to the rebel cause, but in August 2011, his hold on power seemed over as rebels entered Tripoli, seized parts of the capital, and also raided his compound. Rebels ransacked the palace and destroyed much of the items inside, but he was nowhere to be seen. Gaddafi had surrounded himself with a huge entourage, and a large convoy of around 75 vehicles was spotted on the 20th of October 2011 near to Sirte. The convoy was hit by NATO airstrikes, and the planes destroyed many of the vehicles. Gaddafi, who was shaken, was taken by his bodyguards, who were engaged in a firefight with rebels, to a nearby storm drain, or a large drain pipe, and they hid him there. But there was little they could do. The rebels discovered Gaddafi, and they then captured him, and he was taken out injured already, as a grenade had gone off near to him. He was bleeding, and the Misrata rebels inflicted significant further injury to him. He was stabbed in the backside with a large metal rod or a bayonet, and was kicked and beaten in the face. He was then pulled up onto the front of a pickup truck and he fell off it because he was so weak as it drove away. But someone had pulled out a pistol and shot him in the head at some point, and Gaddafi also had gunshot wounds to his stomach. Much of the proceedings surrounding Gaddafi's execution and death was captured on mobile phones, and this footage was then circled in the world's media. That afternoon the rebels' Prime Minister revealed the news of Gaddafi's death to the people, but in true medieval fashion, the body of Gaddafi was then taken to be placed on public display in a nearby market or supermarket it has been described as. The body of Gaddafi and his son were displayed for 4 days, and people flocked from all over Libya to come and see his remains. Newspaper coverage from the Times stated of the display of his corpse that Libya's interim rulers ended the public display of the bodies of Muammar Gaddafi, his son and army chief, on Monday after 4 days in which thousands of Libyans came to see for themselves that the dictator was really dead. Guards locked the gates of the compound surrounding the cold storage container where the grim parody of the lying in state typically accorded to deceased leaders had been played out. That may signal a decision is near over how and where to bury the bodies, or simply that they are seen as a health hazard. 2 National Transitional Council officials confirmed the decision to shut off the area to the public, giving no reason. That's enough, said one of the guards. He's been causing us as much trouble dead as he did alive. There had been thousands of people who came to see Gaddafi's dead body, and the corpses were laid out on filthy, dirty mattresses, and decay had begun to set in very quickly. It was said that fighters guarding Gaddafi's darkening body and that of his son Motasim and his former army chief had placed plastic sheeting under them as fluids leaked into the market cold store in Misrata, where they had been taken after their capture and killing near Gaddafi's hometown of Sirte. What had happened is due to the constant stream of people coming in to see Gaddafi's body, the doors of the refrigeration unit where the bodies had been placed had been opened so much and so frequently that the large fridge had failed to stop the rapid decomposition, and the remains of Gaddafi were rotting so badly that guards handed out surgical masks to anyone who came to visit, and they even covered the bodies in disinfectant when they could. The remains of Gaddafi caused a number of moral issues too, as he was a strict Muslim and follower of Islam, and tradition regarding burials for Muslims is that the body needs to be buried quickly, usually within a day. But some believe that if he would have been a good man, then he would have been buried quickly. The body of Gaddafi was buried in an unidentified and unmarked location in the desert, and the locals believe this was done, as to them the desert is hell due to the heat, somewhere that they believed was fit for the man who had ruled over them for many years. The display of Gaddafi's corpse and body was done for 4 days, as people came to see his remains, and by all accounts it was a festering state by the time that the 4 days had come to an end. It was known that the body was leaking fluids, and it was placed on a very filthy mattress, but this was the fate that the rebels believed was right for the man who had been their dictator for many decades. Gaddafi was a very strange man, but someone who had backed terrorism in other countries during his time in control, but his fate at the hands of the rebels was brutal, and the death he suffered was horrific. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.